So thanks so much, everybody, for being here today. I'm Renee Bovis. I'm the Associate Director of Institutional Advancement, and we just thank you for joining us on Beat Orange Week. We just thought that this would be a nice way to hear from some of our coaches as they're all handling an unprecedented year. And so I have some questions that I'm going to be asking them. Have gotten some questions from all of you prior to this webinar, and then we'll allow some time for Q&A at the end. But if you have questions throughout, feel free to put those in the Q&A section that's right at the bottom of your screen. And Rob Rahusky, Director of Annual Giving, will be handling those to make sure we get those questions answered for you. I think that takes care of the logistical part of things. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Coaches, I'm going to have you all introduce yourselves if you could. Just let us know, name, what you coach, how long you've been with the college. And Rick, we'll let you kick it off.
Okay, thanks, Renee. Appreciate everybody joining us today. I'm Rick Willis. I serve as the Director of Athletics and the head football coach. I've been in the athletic director role this is the 16th year now, and I've been at Wartburg for 24 years. So it's been a good time. Bob, you want to go next? I think you're on mute.
I'm Bob Amsberry. I'm still learning how to Zoom. I'm the women's basketball coach, and I'm in my 15th year.
Go for it, Ryan.
Ryan Chapman, I'm the head cross-country men's and women's coach and the assistant track coach. This is year 5 here at Wartburg.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Pins. I'm the head women's soccer coach, and I am in my 10th season here at Wartburg, and I'm also an alum of Wartburg, so I've spent many years here.
Great, very good. All right, Rick, well, we're going to let you tell us just a little bit more about the decision that the ARC made about allowing some sports to play in the fall versus those that were postponed to spring, and how that decision was made and what factors played into that.
Sure. Well, it was, kind of a long process and somewhat of a confusing process, and it had several layers to it, some different things coming together. I mean, it started in the summer with the NCAA basically making a decision that they were going to cancel all fall sport championships. So then our league proceeded to try to figure out how we might adjust to that. The NCAA also came out a little bit later with a ruling that said that student athletes could retain their eligibility if they only participated in half of the normal number of contests that they were allowed. And so for quite some time in late summer, our conference was working hard to configure schedules that were designed to take advantage of that eligibility waiver, since we didn't expect there to be championships. But in early August, the NCAA kind of changed their guidance and turned what previously had been some recommendations about testing into testing mandates. And they have sports broken down into 3 categories, with what they refer to as high risk, medium risk, and low risk. And so for the high risk sports, the testing mandates were going to require every athlete to be tested weekly in order to participate. And in the medium risk, there was a different series of a little bit less. And then in the low risk, all you had to do was test what they call a gate test when they first arrive on campus. And then you wouldn't test again unless there was symptoms or exposures. And so this testing mandate really for the high-risk sports is what led to the ARC's decision to postpone the high-risk fall sports, because all the schools in our league were not going to be able to accommodate that, either from an expense perspective or from an access to testing supplies, maybe in many cases from both perspectives. You'd be talking about, at least on our campus, probably testing over 250 student athletes every week at what now is about $48 a test. So that became prohibitive and kind of led us to the decision that we were going to try to do as much as we could to try to provide the best opportunity for as many of our student athletes as possible. And so we proceeded with going ahead with our golf programs, our tennis programs, and our cross-country programs. Cross-country was categorized as a medium risk, but there were some things that you were able to do to kind of reclassify it into a low risk in terms of some adjustments that you made to how you start and finish races and things like that. So we were able to do that, and we've really had good success, not without hiccups across the conference, but good success with getting those sports accomplished here this fall.
Great. Thanks for sharing that and giving some insight to that. So as Rick said, then you all kind of have protocol that you have to follow. So just wondering if you can share with us, what protocol it is that you as your team are having to follow, and then where that puts you in your season and going forward for the rest of this year. Bob, why don't you start? You're muted again.
Unmute.
Still learning. I'm coachable. I'm just not very good at it. So our team has this fall participated in some voluntary workouts. We've done as many of those outside as we have been able to with our strength staff. We had started to play some open gyms, but times are different, and we're trying to do our part to mask when appropriate, when we're unable to socially distant, to kind of protect what we call our inner circle, our players, our coaches, our managers, our athletic training staff. And then we actually had our first practice yesterday. And, a lot of people want to know if our masks are on, and our players' masks are off when we exert. And through our athletic training staff, the research has shown that exerting with a mask on is not a good idea. And so we're just trying to trust each other that when we can control the situation, that we're going to mask up and try to protect the inner circle. And then in practice, our players can compete. And we really, we toyed around with some different practice models on how to socially distant and do some of those things. But, we really feel like we've got protocol in place to keep our group safe. And that if we're going to practice, we need to be able to practice reasonably to prepare for competition. So that's the way we're doing it. Our coaches, our manager, our athletic training staff mask up in practice. And for the most part, there are times where, we'll take it down when we're instructing. There's times where kids need to see our faces, but for the most part, we're trying to socially distance even in practice. And, but our kids are hanging in there and they're hopeful. And, our discussion after practice last night was the real challenge for us is to stay true to a process that we don't know what the process really is. And so we're just trying to prepare like a championship team and be as good as we can be, and not take for granted the opportunity that we do have. And we're pretty confident in trusting each other to stay as safe as possible through this thing and protect our circle. We also know that if any one of us at some point will test positive, we're all in quarantine. So, it's a big group to try to protect, but, I think our kids are on board and we're doing our best.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. Tiffany, Ryan, want to share kind of what your teams are doing and how you're having to function differently with the protocol?
Yeah, this year, obviously, we've had some different approaches to how we get outside, and we did some things as, as simple as we did put our group into 2 training groups early on for several weeks. So due to the size of our roster, we had a pretty, over 35 girls this year. So we put them in groups of roughly 18, and they were just training with those individuals. We've made dots out at our field that are 6 feet apart so that when they come out and they're getting their water, it's our sports used to congregating and, huddles and things. So we tried to create an environment that was easy for them to avoid those situations that they're used to. As we've progressed, the girls have been really committed to making sure they're wearing their masks when they're supposed to. So similar to what Bob was saying, once we get into full practice, after we warm up, they are allowed to remove their mask if they choose to while they're exerting. Our entire staff is wearing the mask. The girls are also required, to take their temperatures daily. We have different protocols for our locker room, how long they get to be in there. Again, the training groups make it really helpful because one training group gets to go at a certain time in the locker room and then the next training group goes, again, just to try to eliminate the risk. For us, it's a little bit different. Our spring season was canceled, and for returners, they hadn't really been on the field since November of last year, of 2019. So our focus this fall was to just get reconnected with each other, get reconnected with the game, have fun again, remember why we play, why we're here. So we're getting things done, but similar to even what Bob said, our focus is just a little bit different right now because we've all been through so much, and we're just trying to get on the field as much as possible and do things as safe as we can, but also making sure that we're helping the girls get better and grow as individuals. But they've done an outstanding job so far of doing their best, but they love each other. So the hardest part is keeping them away from each other, social distancing, but it's been good.
So going off what Bob and Tiffany said, I mean, we've been doing this the longest. We started August 16th, and knock on all the wood you got. I mean, we've had 0 cases, 80 athletes. Things are different and things are the same. I mean, understand by nature, cross-country runners tend to socially distance. It's just sort of part of the sport. They tend to cling to one another outside of practice as well. What have we done differently? Well, we've created pods. We have groups of 8 that they train together on recovery days. We're not able to do that on workout days, so it's not an ideal pod system, but even, training groups are small. Our training groups might be 2 or 3, a piece if we're doing rep training. Other things that we're doing, there's masks when we're not running. When we're running, they're able to take those masks off. Many of them run with neck gaiters. So if they're in a situation, whether they have to, let's just say something, they're out on a 10-mile run and they got to use the bathroom, a quick start or something, they can flip that mask up. And that's pretty easy to do. The one thing that we've had to do very differently this year, we're very much a co-ed program. And that's a strength for us, not a weakness. I mean, our guys are better because of the strengths the girls team bring and vice versa. We've really tried to, actually we've had to do things a little bit different. You put the men and women combined, there's 80 of us. All right. So workout days, I'll go one place with the guys or the girls. My assistant coach Spitzer, he'll take the opposite group to a different location. That's definitely new. But it's actually been kind of a nice change, right? I mean, those groups get a little more attention, right? So it's something that, post-COVID, if we can even say that, if we can think about that, the possibility of that, when that will be, we might continue to do something, something like that. We have very small, very short breakdowns where we're masked up and we separate. On Mondays when we do meet recap, because we are indeed racing right now, we go in the football stadium bleachers, right, where we can really sit apart. I am blessed with a loud voice, so I can make myself heard, make myself known. But if anything, we're trying to do the things we always do. We're trying to have great team culture, right? A lot of enthusiasm, a lot of excitement. Something I said to the athletes all summer is that our our coaching staff, we're all in. You know, we don't see this, and I speak for Tiffany and Bob as well. We don't see this as just a gap year. I mean, we're in this to get better, to improve, to have a really awesome experience. And I think the young men and women have really, you know, bought into that. Other things that we've done differently when we do, you know, core circuits and whatnot, we are much more stationary. This is cross country 2.0 for us. I mean, we're still out there. We're running in miles. We're getting big miles in. You know, we're running in groups. They're just smaller groups. When we're in the locker room, you know, there's masks on and they're in and out. The training room is a little different. You know, our athletes can't just waltz in there. But for some of our athletes, that's a good thing. I mean, the athletic trainers will tell you. I mean, there's definitely some distance running hypochondriacs that sort of pitch a tent in that training room. This is pushing self-reliance. You know, there are some skills, some positive skills that are going to come from this experience that, you know, I think are going to make our athletes, you know, simply better at a lot of different things. You know, before I came to Wartburg, for almost a decade, I coached at an institution that had no indoor track, no outdoor track, no locker rooms. And I would always say I was going to be a better coach because of these experiences, because I had to be flexible, right? I had to think outside of the box. I had to do things a little bit differently. And that certainly came true. I mean, these experiences for us as coaches, we got to do things just a little bit differently. But I'm okay with that. You know, we still have an opportunity to spend time with these great young men and women, and that's been really special. So I really feel, and I don't know if it's a question later, that even with all these protocols in place, taking the temperature checks, the info center reports in the morning, our athletes are in a pretty good spot. I mean, our morale is really high right now. I hate to say the new normal, somewhat of a cliched term, but they're certainly adapting, you know, to their expectations and respecting their expectations. You know, Bob talked about protecting the inner circle. That's certainly something that these athletes carry around, I think, like a badge. They don't carry it around with fear. When they go home, let's say we have a couple athletes going to a wedding on a weekend. They sit in the back pew and they don't go to the reception because they don't want to hurt their brothers and sisters. You know, and we've seen that across the board. A young man or a young woman will say, "Coach, I'm going to go home this weekend to see my parents, but I'm not going to hang out with my friends. You know, I don't want to put the team in jeopardy." And I really feel like they've been brandishing, you know, that responsibility again, not with fear and trepidation, right? Not walking around, you know, on eggshells. But just with their head held high, you know, saying we're going to uphold this cool thing that we have going, right? We're not going to be the ones that bring, you know, negativity to the program. So
that's great. That's wonderful to hear that around the responsibility that they're taking. And then also you guys are finding things that, you know, even after this, you know, when we think of the after, there's going to be things that may stay that way. We've learned from this. So we did have a question that came in that I think is relevant to kind of right now that wanted to ask. Just asking, like, if there is a significant number of positive tests that would come through a team, is there like a threshold then that would affect an entire season? And then how do you deal with a student if they were to test positive? And then once you're in a season, how often do you have to test, or is that protocol based on each sport? Those are kind of three questions in one.
And there isn't necessarily a standard answer to that. When somebody tests positive, then our contact tracers will go back and work and see who they've been around, and the nature of the sport may determine whether or not that entire sport is affected. Like Bob mentioned, it's pretty much already stated that in basketball, if they have somebody in their inner circle that's positive, there's no way that if they've been practicing, there's not going to be contact with the rest of the team. But in some other sports, that might not be the case. So it really becomes a judgment that our contact tracing staff, which basically is our athletic training staff, who have done a great job with that, you know, would make that determination. Once somebody's isolated, then there's places they can go on campus, or they may leave campus and go back to their home and be isolated for that period of time. If they're on campus, there's meals delivered to them. Those types of things happen. What was the other part of it?
What else was there? And then how often do you have to test once you're in a season?
Yeah, so the testing depends on your risk level and the NCAA guidelines. So right now, we're not testing our high risk sports because we're not competing. Basketball just getting started, we tested all the basketball players before they started practice, and then once they start playing, there'll be a different protocol for how often they need to be tested. But most of the testing at Wartburg right now is going to be based on either somebody is symptomatic, so they report a symptom either through our screening processes, or they just come to a coach or a trainer and say they're not feeling well, or they have been contact traced to have an exposure. So either one of those two things would warrant a test. But we're not what they call really surveillance testing our student athletes right now.
Okay.
Pretty much every student athlete I've had that's even felt sick to their stomach, I mean, I've encouraged them, go get tested. And I mean, that's probably 10 athletes, about, 8% of our team or so. And we've been negative every time, but why not? I mean, I feel like Wartburg's been pretty conservative in a good way. Like I don't feel like anybody's, I feel like the measurements that they've done with contact tracing has been really good. And as coaches, it's, I don't care if I got a big meet coming up, right? I mean, there's a bigger issue going on, so if we have to sit those athletes out, right,
yeah.
We do what we need to do.
Yeah, one of the things that happened, very early on, right, when we got back, when we got everybody back on campus, we had really a spike in cases. And we made a decision to put a pause on really all of our sports that were not competing for 2 weeks. And so for 2 weeks, we didn't practice. We didn't have that type of association, and that really helped us get those numbers under control. And since that point, we've been very fortunate with our numbers of positive cases and the number of students that have been in quarantined. And so it only takes one situation to change that, but we've been on a pretty good path here for over a month.
I think that definitely shows the commitment that the students are playing in their role as athletes, and that's great. Switching gears then a little bit, I guess, talk to us about your goals for the season, knowing that the championship structure is and will be different. Some of you alluded to it, but just how are you handling that? How are your student athletes handling that as well?
I can go quick, and I think football is a little different. No matter what ends up happening with football, we're not going to be able to play, a full round robin schedule. I mean, the most games anybody in our league is probably going to play in the spring will be 5. Some will play 3, depending on kind of how things shake out. But there won't be a conference championship determined in the sport of football, and so that's not there for people to strive for. And I think there's 2 things that we're trying to balance. I think there's a group of students, maybe a small group of seniors, that this is going to be their experience. They're going to finish in May. They're going to go on. One of our guys is trying to get into dental school and is not going to come back. And so trying to figure out how we can make this the best experience for people in that situation that we possibly can. And then at the same time, having, a little bit of a longer term view of it from a developmental perspective with a different group of guys. And so kind of balancing those 2, make it the best experience it can be, and try to take advantage of everything you can from a developmental perspective for the rest of the team.
We do have a conference meet. So it's pretty tangible, and if you've followed the results, we have some pretty clear objectives every meet, and I really challenge our athletes, and I challenge regarding depth. I mean, we want to be, if people know how cross country is scored, 1 through 5 score and 6 and 7 displace. And we want to beat teams with our 8 through 14. We want to dominate this schedule, and we have so far. our girls have perfect scored every meet. Our guys, we allowed 2 points. And we plan on continuing that throughout. So it's a little more finite, but at the same time, my men and women, this is the later questions. I mean, we're not conference level teams. I mean, the crews we have right now, these are podium level teams, so the majority, like Rick alluded to, the majority of my teams are coming back next year. So this is really, practice for a national run, a title run next year for both genders, right? Which is a really exciting thing. So we're working on skills and we're working on steps and we're working on, team strategies and things that we need to do, right? When we can go after this, hopefully, right? We'll be back to somewhat normal next year. D1's hosting a cross-country national meet this year, so, we're able to stay pretty focused on, having that conference meet, having meets every 2 weeks. Running is so tangible where, there are PRs, personal records. Athletes are still able on an individual level to better themselves, right? And ultimately, that's the main reason why we're out here. Our young men and women are trying to do things they've never done before, right? They're challenging themselves and, and just trying to run fast. And if anybody's listening, ever had that running bug, ever caught it, which some people, I don't know if Rick's ever caught the running bug.
Easy.
Right? Easy. You run, you PR, and then you want to do it again, right? And you want to get faster and you want to get faster. And so we're still able to utilize that. And we know how fortunate we are. And if an athlete on our team, it forgets, I'm going to remind them every week. Rick could tell you, we're one of like 40 schools in D3 doing this, right now, out of like 425, so we're really blessed. We're really fortunate to be able to compete. I have peers contacting me, saying, man, oh man, we're jealous. We're jealous of this opportunity. Good for you. Good for you. So we're really taking advantage, of the opportunity to compete. So in November 7th, we want to dominate that conference meet and then just start looking ahead to what comes next.
We're going to have hopefully a conference title to play for this spring. Volleyball, men's soccer, and us, at this point are looking to do a round robin play. So we definitely have something to look forward to at this point. Our focus this, fall, as I mentioned earlier, was about reconnecting, but we've kind of talked about what a unique opportunity for us. Most falls, we get no more than 13 days before our opening game. And this year we brought in a huge freshman class, and we actually, we had a great year last year, and we basically returned to everybody. So to have this time to not only build our culture that's really strong, but, really learn about each other and just get better as a group is super unique. And we're trying to find that this is a really positive thing for us as we continue to build on some really lofty goals. And the girls, I would be lying if I wouldn't say it's not tough on some of our seniors and some other ones, but as Rick mentioned, making the most of their experience, making sure they understand that we are committed to this year and making it the best possible with the situation that we're presented with. And, this last week we had a night scrimmage out on the game field, and it was awesome. And yes, we were playing each other, but it was still an opportunity for them to step on our game field, play under the lights, and just some small things like that have really gone a long way. And I know the student athletes appreciate just the opportunity to be together. I cannot stress that enough, how thrilled they were that we're back on campus, that they get to go to classes in some way, and that we're practicing. Really, they're really grateful for that as the coaches are as well.
So our goals are, I unmuted. Our goals kind of remain the same. Our first one and every year is to be a great team. And we talk a lot about what being a great team means. And it has nothing to do with winning and losing. It has everything to do with how we treat each other, how we hold each other accountable, how we trust in each other, how we love each other. And so that's our number one. It's always our number one. And we talked a lot about that prior to our first practice yesterday, and just committing to that process and being great together and what it truly means to be a great team. Part of that every year is how we pride ourselves in how we handle anything that is thrown at us, any adversity that comes our way. And we all know that this year we'll probably have more than we've ever had. And I think our group embraces that challenge, and we pride ourselves in being better than other teams that we compete against in that area. And I think that has allowed us to compete at a high level. And then the second goal that we have is to defend our conference title. And we've got 4 straight running, and we don't know when we're going to play. We have ideas. As of now, we will have a conference championship, and our kids are committed to defending that thing. And we know that it's going to be harder this year than it ever has, but we want to continue to be chased. And our kids are committed to that. But, I think the number one, and I always go back to, is what do we need to do to be the best team that we can be? And then the winning is going to take care of itself.
I appreciate so much how you all talk about that and just how important the team aspect is. And I really do think that that's something that makes Wartburg, I don't know, unique and special. So thanks for that. Wanted to ask, some of you mentioned your seniors and what you're trying to do to provide them with the best season possible. However, we do know that there is the possibility for them to return for a 5th year. Just wondering if you had an opportunity and have been talking to your players to have those conversations, and if you think any of them will be returning.
So as I mean, and Rick can clarify this. I mean, as worded, I mean, it's not just our seniors that are going to be able to take advantage of this, sophomores, juniors. So it really changes the dynamic, of how we train. Running is such a developmental sport on an individual basis, right? I mean, we have team goals, but those team goals are also interspiced with individual development, whether somebody, right, needs, and any sport is, right? I mean, any sport is an athlete who needs to put on, a football player who needs to put on weight to really move to the next level, get stronger, right? Or somebody who needs to be mentally tougher, whatever the case. Athletes coming back for an additional year changes the game. I mean, it really does. I mean, it allows for us to rethink, sophomore development, junior development. As far as our seniors, it's been interesting because it's really been based more on genders. I don't think at this point, well, I think maybe one of my senior women will come back, but it's not even, I think it's more of a credit thing in general, more than an athletic decision. And about 50% of my males are planning to return. And I'm not making any statement about that. I will tell you that all of my women that are leaving are going to graduate school, and many of them have already got into graduate school, and they're excited about this next chapter. And 2 of them, I believe, plan on continuing to run and use their eligibility in graduate school. But right now, it's been interesting, to say the least. I mean, I'd say about 50% of my men plan on returning next year for a title run, and I think this will be the farewell tour, for my ladies.
I think at football we have a good number of seniors, probably 6 to 8 seniors that I think would like or planning to try to take advantage of the opportunity to come back. Obviously, there's still things that can change as they figure everything out. It requires some planning for their academic planning and various things. And I think the way things have come together with the NCAA rule, and then with Wartburg's creative policy of offering the 5th year, it really has provided everybody with at least the opportunity to consider that as an option. And some of the younger student athletes, they don't know yet, how that's going to play out, but at least they have the option that's there for them as they progress through the program. So it's exciting, and I think a lot of our seniors are excited and already, kind of like I said before, have started to take that longer term view of this thing. And the thing I've been impressed with, and others have sort of alluded to this, I think, is just, how resilient our student athletes are, how adaptable they can be. And, those are obviously positive traits are going to serve you well in a lot of different situations throughout their lives.
A lot of our seniors will be graduating, and similar to what Coach Chapman was saying, have some plans and are ready. We do have a few that will be returning for a 5th year. I do think it's important to know, we're a fall sport, so it does set up, fairly nicely for them to think through it and, potentially make a commitment that they could also graduate in December. If they chose to. I know I do have a group of juniors who are really considering it as well now that Wartburg has committed to this opportunity for them. So we're very appreciative that Wartburg, took this step to support not just the student athletes, but all of our students and providing them an option to have an extended opportunity that they missed out on this year. And I do think it's going to serve some, at least women's soccer players, really well moving forward.
So with basketball, it's a little bit different. I think it's maybe a harder decision to exercise that 5th year because we play over the 2 semesters. So my seniors, I think they've certainly had thoughts about what that might look like. But I think it's going to be hard for any of them to make it happen with, the credits that they need. I have a couple that are actually part-time this next winter term on their way to graduate. So to find things to take that make sense to come back for 2 more semesters makes it really difficult. I've got another one that already has a job. She did an internship and has a job offer and has accepted it. And, so for the older ones, I think that in my mind, I got to fight for them to play as many games as we can play. And so in our discussions with our conference, I'm the one banging the drum to play as many games as we can possibly get in because those seniors deserve it. I have 7 of them and I don't want to short them to save eligibility for kids that might not come back anyway. So, that's where I'm at on this thing. And our kids want to play. Our underclassmen, I think some of them have thought about what that might look like and would have a chance to maybe change their academic plan to stretch that out over 5 years, pick up another major, and to do some of that. But until they know what our season looks like this year and how many games we play, I think they're just going to roll into being as normal as we possibly can.
Thanks for sharing that. Speaking of trying to be as normal as we possibly can, I think people are curious to know if we know anything yet about whether fans are going to be able to be a part of the season and watching. Do we know much about that yet? Anything that we can share at this point?
There's not a lot of definitive news. I think I would expect that if we're competing that we would be able to find a way to have some fans at our games. It will certainly depend on the situation with COVID at that point in time. It may depend on, the nature of the sport, the capacity of the venue and various things. So certainly we're having fans right now at our cross country meets, at our tennis meets, and those types of things. It's a little bit harder maybe with the indoor sports. And so anytime we would have any, it would certainly be with the same type of mitigation that we are asking of everybody with masking and social distancing. And so if we had to limit the capacity of a crowd so that there could be appropriate social distancing, that could be a possibility. But no final decisions have been made on that, but I would expect that we would have the ability to have some people in attendance. For sure, I would hope people's families at a minimum, and hopefully more than that, students and alums, supporters, and things like that.
Yeah, Renee, we've had a lot of fans at our meets, and Waverly Shell Rock uses our course to host high school meets as well. And there's been as many as 25 meets, or 25 teams going at the same time. And I've been pretty impressed with the fans. They seem to really get it. There's just been, a lot of masking up. The cross country course is certainly big enough to separate So not only have we had fans, but I feel like, it's been a situation where regardless of, politics, regardless of, one's own personal view, regardless, I'm a libertarian. People get it. And when they've been on our campus, and on that course, they've done what they need to do so we can have these events. And I've been pleased with that for sure.
Great. Ryan, want to ask you some questions specifically since you are, competing and in season. These came from those prior to the webinar. So just, you talked about that there is the conference meet, but just how do you think your teams would do if you did have a chance to have the regional national championship?
Well, there's a website that it kind of like a D3 hoops, or I know Coach Pins soccer has one, like D3 soccer, that put together some polls. They had our girls ranked 3rd in the nation behind Johns Hopkins and Wash U. They had our guys ranked 10th, which kind of irked our guys a little bit. But that stuff's fun. I mean, bottom line, paper burns, and you just never know what it's going to look like. But I mean, these are definitely national level teams. On the women's side, I don't think there's a team in the country that has a 1-2 like we have right now. I mean, unfortunately, one of those girls is going to graduate after this year, but we're going to have fun with it as long as we can. I mean, these girls are just unbelievable. That's Aubry Fischer, Karina Collett. The guys' side, I mean, they're running. Just last meet, we had 3 guys run the 5th, 6th, and 7th fastest times in Wartburg history on the cross country course. So both teams are on the podium right now, as far as I'm concerned. Next year will be a fun year because, we'll have both teams on a title run. I don't know right now. I don't know who could beat our men. I mean, we have so much depth. They're running really hot. And even with that, we're sitting some athletes out. I mean, we're running really well right now. And, we're sitting one of our top young ladies is doing a gap year. 2 of our top guys, one of them, Sam Pinkowski, a 4-time All-American, they're taking gap years this year. Right. So this isn't even, Wartburg cross country's, A+ squad. This is like B+, A- squad. So if there were a regional or national meet, I mean, we'd certainly be humbling ourselves and focusing in on, on making a title run, both men and women.
Great. You mentioned the perfect scores or almost perfect scores. Have there been any in Iowa or ARC Conference Championship that have scores like that? Has that?
Well, we scored 19 points last year. The men did 19 points at the conference meet. Luther, they're very quick to remind me. Back in the 70s, they had a perfect score year, and it was 70s or early 80s. It was a year that Luther won the national championship. They had a perfect score at the conference meet. Yeah, of course, Nebraska Wesleyan wasn't there right now. Nebraska Wesleyan was a good program in the 60s, 70s, 80s. But on the ladies' side, I don't know. I feel like, I mean, Steve Johnson's on this call. I feel like if any team would have had one, it would have been Steve, with some of the women's teams he had. But I don't think there's been 15 points on the women's side before. We're probably not going to get it this year. Loris's top girl's really good, really good. I mean, we might get 17 points. We might score. I mean, definitely below 20 points is doable. It's certainly the most depth I've had, especially on a women's team. It's really hard to get depth, on the women's team. And somebody, had put a question about recruiting. You can see it in the news. I mean, Minnesota dropping men's track. I mean, there's certain conferences, the MAC. Most of those teams, they're women-only programs. There's a lot more opportunities for these gals, to go to school. So to get women's depth, a lot of it is, it's certainly hard work, a lot of development, a lot of luck, right? And then a lot of buy-in, So we're happy to be doing it, but we're certainly not going to take it for granted. Our goal this past meet was to perfect score on the women's side, knowing that Central's #1 girl is pretty good. She went to nationals in the mile last year, but we wound up putting 7 girls ahead of her. So they're a real high achieving group for sure.
That's great. You mentioned that your top 2 women, your 1 and your 2, they're some of the best in the nation. How do you think they'd rank individually in a national?
Yeah, Karina was 11th last year, and I think she was like the number 6 returner. Aubry Fischer missed All-American last year by 0.8. And she's running hot. She ran course record the other day. She's actually, been our top runner for the last couple weeks. It's easy, right? Yes, these questions are fun, the what if questions. Both of them certainly have the abilities to be top 5, in the country. And frankly, if, to kind of put this in perspective, last meet, Aubry ran her last 1,000 meters of the race at 16:10 5K pace, right? So when you're sitting on that kind of closing speed, you can be a national champ, So, but both of those girls are definitely top 5 material. And then, even on the guys' side, I mean, we probably right now have 5 guys that could, 3 of them are already All-Americans, but we have 5 guys that could run, in that top 40. So.
That's great. It's exciting. All right. For those of you still anticipating your seasons, we're all still like hoping that green light is coming. You're going to be able to compete. So just give us and tell us, what do we have to look forward to this season for each of your teams?
Go ahead, Tiff, you can start.
Well, we had a great year last year. And like I said earlier, we returned a lot of young talent. We brought in a very good sized first year class. So I'm excited about the depth that we have, and the experience. To have that combination is something that's really fun to work with. So the conference is always really challenging for us, to be honest. We have great teams in our conference, and several of them are always ranked regionally. At the same time, we do have lofty goals. I think if we would have had a normal season, we really would have been, trying to achieve something that maybe no Wartburg women's soccer team had done. But we're going to keep it simple and, really focus on just playing our best soccer. And when we do that, we're really difficult to beat, and when we don't worry about others. So our hope is just to be in a good place physically. It'll be a challenge. This is a different calendar, depending on when we start. It could be like late March, early April, to be physically in a physical place at that point, coming off the winter for soccer. It will be something new. So just really, I think, again, focusing on coming together. We've been using the word, being flexible and reconnecting and just being learners. If we do those 3 things, it's going to be a really great spring.
Yeah, for us, I talked a little bit about it, but we have 7 seniors that have been through it, that know how to do it, that know what it takes. We'll rely on them a lot. We did lose 5 seniors from last year and some great ones. And, whenever you lose kids like Emma Gertis, who's one of the best players I ever coached, you have questions about how you will fill what you're missing. But, we've been fortunate to have some good recruiting classes behind her, and not just Emma. We had Amanda Brainerd was a first team all-league kid, and Katie and Alicia, and those guys were really good for us. And so we have to replace a lot, but I'm really confident in our 7 seniors and how they'll lead the group. And in our first practice, I noticed several kids have come back a lot better than they were a year ago. And we have a great freshman class that I think can be special. It's going to take them time, but, so from a competitive standpoint, we're going to figure it out. We're going to figure out how we need to play, who we need to play, those kinds of things. And, just making sure our number one goal stays our number one goal. And that's building our culture and building our team to be a great team. And then we do know we won't compete before January. So, we were able to practice October 1st if we wanted to, but 3 months of practice with no games, I think can be really challenging on a group. So, this week we practiced yesterday, we'll practice today, and then we don't practice again until I think Tuesday next week. So we're going to start out 3 times a week. And then once we get into November, we'll try to make it more of a, a normal week where, not quite normal, but we'll probably practice 3 times a week and then have a intra-squad game every week to make sure that we're learning in that setting. And, those will play just like games, and film them and learn from film, and have some film session where we can really get in and learn like we would in a normal year, so that when January does come around, hopefully we're kind of hitting mid-season stride. Our team typically changes tremendously in those first 6 or 8 games that we play. So, the development during that time, we can't wait until January to figure some of those things out. Because oftentimes we'll drop an early game that we wouldn't drop later in the year. So we've got to find ways to learn those lessons when we're not really competing against someone else. So, it's just thinking outside the box a little bit, but, our kids are committed to defending our conference title. And however the conference schedule shapes up, we're going to adapt and we're going to figure it out. And if we're missing kids due to pandemic, whoever we got are going to get on the floor and we're going to get it done.
Yeah, football is, like I said, going to be a little different. I think the big thing is just trying to, have guys get out there and have fun being part of a team, have fun being part of something that's bigger than themselves, and trying to get better, trying to help guys get better and develop. There's an opportunity probably to do things a little differently. There's going to be a few people missing probably during the springtime. And so using those games as a tool of development, at the same time, having a chance to be together as a team and competing, I think is really what we're going to be looking at. And it's certainly going to be unique. It's hard to play too many football games in the spring and then be ready to turn around and start playing football games again in August. And there is a amount of recovery that happens after a season. And so how many games you play in the spring, I think, in the sport of football is a really interesting question when you're going to start playing again in August. And so that's something we have to be mindful of. So health, trying to keep guys healthy too is a big part of it.
Sure, absolutely. Good point. Well, that kind of wraps up my questions. I'm make sure I'm mindful of time. So ask a few questions that have come in here from others. Rick, this one is more to you about the likelihood of events such as the Unified Sports or Special Olympics being able to happen at the W in February, just knowing that there's going to be a lot increase of teams playing during that time and how that might be handled.
Yeah. Well, I think it really is going to have more to do with the COVID situation at that point in time, and how groups like Special Olympics in Iowa are handling things and so forth than it is with our facility. We have it planned right now. We're intending to have an event like that. Obviously, like everything we're doing right now, there may have to be some adjustments made as to how we implement and have the event, but it really will depend more on what the status of things are from a COVID situation. Our facility is, and all the challenges of playing all these different sports in the spring is going to be tremendous. It'll be different, but in February, it's probably not going to be a lot different than it normally is.
Very good. We had someone ask do we know, has there been a student athlete who wants to work on their master's degree at Wartburg in their 5th year? Has that been something that any of them have discussed?
I think there's some talk of that. Obviously, we're getting ready to move forward with a master's in leadership. And so that would be potentially a good fit for a lot of athletes. And I think certainly has some potential to be an option, for a lot of different people, both right now and as we move forward.
Great. And then someone else just asked about how you think not having, full fans in the stands may impact your student athletes' mindset, yours as coaches. Have Have you given some thought to what that is going to look like for those of you who aren't yet playing?
I don't know, Bob, you want to take a swing at that?
Yeah, I don't hear any of you complaining about what we should do. You know, really, I don't think it will affect us a whole lot. I mean, and certainly when we do get good crowds, you know, it provides some energy. But, you know, we try to provide the same energy when we're on the road or wherever we are. It doesn't matter. Our kids just want to play. And, you know, I think that when there's not energy around us, we have to create our own energy. And so that is the least of our concerns, really. We hope that we're playing. We hope that we can get as many fans in there as possible, you know, because I think that it just provides an atmosphere around us. But our kids are really they're not going to make excuses. They are going to take whatever's thrown at them. And if, you know, we've played some huge games at Wartburg in our December holiday tournament every year when, you know, there might be 100 or 150 people there. And we're bringing in top 10 teams in the country typically each year to play in that. And we've been winning that thing almost every year. So, you know, I think our kids are going to adapt to whatever that situation is. And certainly we're hopeful that we can get as many of you in there as possible. And, you know, there's nothing like a full Levick arena in a tight game. I mean, for sure, it adds excitement to it. And, but we'll be ready regardless.
That's a good answer. It's a good answer. I mean, I think, you know, having great crowds makes it a better experience for our student athletes and for everybody. But if we can't, then I think everybody will be ready to adapt to that.
Sure.
You know, and Bob mentioned the word creative. I thought this was really cool. I just wanted to make sure if people, you know, and most people aren't, I'm not naive. I know most of you don't just think, hey, I want to spend my time at a cross country meet this weekend. But last cross country meet, we had the drumline out there, and the drumline contacted me. And I just think that's a really cool thing. I mean, first of all, our athletes loved it. I mean, it's fantastic. But it's also given our other, you know, student athletes or our other extracurriculars an opportunity to do something. I mean, those drumline, you know, athletes, they're missing out on stuff. You know, we've had marketing teams doing extra stuff for our meets. And I think that's just a blessing of being at a liberal arts college, you know, where we can really get everybody involved with the kind of stuff we're doing. So, I mean, Bob, maybe it's contacting the drumline, you know, and boy, oh boy, that would get you going. It certainly got us excited at the cross country meet.
Sure, absolutely. Well, closing question then that I just want to ask is just how can alumni be supportive of you and your teams, you know, during this time? And we got just a couple minutes, so I don't know. Rick, you maybe want to take this one, and then if we have time, others can add.
Sure. Well, you know, I think being supportive as possible to our student athletes in any way is important during this time, for sure. I mean, it's a hard time for student athletes and for students in general. They're adapting to a lot of different things, whether it be in school with breaks kind of being taken away and various aspects of that. And then obviously a lot of them are very committed to their athletic experiences, and not having those be normal is very difficult. Like I've said, I've been impressed with the way they've adapted to it, but doesn't mean that it's easy. So just, I think being supportive in any way possible, but obviously, you know, supporting our individual programs through, you know, our booster club. You know, our booster club, there are additional expenses. There's some expenses that are reduced because of what's going on, and there's things that we're spending a lot more money on, like the neck gaiters and protective equipment that we bought, all the things that our athletic training room has had to do to adapt to the situation. And obviously, all the testing that is going on is a huge expense, and will continue to be a huge expense moving forward through the next semester if we're able to compete the way we desire to compete. And then, you know, one thing that's kind of unique right now is we just kicked off at the start of this week a crowdfunding opportunity to help support the elite form technology that's going to be in our new edition, the new strength and conditioning edition, to the W, which is progressing nicely. And so I would encourage people to find that link and learn more about the opportunity to help in that regard. But we certainly appreciate the support that we always receive from everybody. And, you know, we've made a lot of progress in the last handful of years, and really our facilities right now at Wartburg are something I think everybody can really be proud of. And that doesn't happen without the support of all of our alumni, parents, and friends.
Absolutely.
Renee, when we, especially when we perfect scored Luther, it's been about a month ago, I bet I got 20 letters from alums. And I mean, alums that were in their 20s, alums that were, you know, in their 60s and 70s. That's so appreciative. You know, I read all those letters to our athletes. It's very humbling. It's just nice to know that people are paying attention, you know. Absolutely. And I think sometimes our athletes feel like, you know, they're out there doing this and in this bizarro world. And it's really nice to know that, you know, they're being watched and supported and rooted on and cheered. So just keep them coming. I mean, it's just been awesome reading those letters to our athletes and, you know, getting them excited. So